The premiums on 90% silver, also known to some of you as junk silver or constitutional silver, have been falling rapidly, and many of you have been asking me if it's time to buy again. Now, I'm not going to answer that question for you, but what I am going to do is call 7 different coin shops all over the US and find out what they're selling it for, and then compare those numbers to what online retailers are selling them for to see where the best place to buy your silver is. So let's get into it. My channel is sponsored by sdbullion.com. New customers can get their first order of gold or silver at spot by going to sdbullion.com/new. So today we're going to be focusing on two-party consent states, which means I can't record the calls. However, stick with us because maybe we called one of your states. You'll have to watch and find out. But let's get started with the first shop, which is in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, keep in mind, the spot price when I called these shops yesterday was $21.75. However, it has went up today, but you can use percentage math to figure out what it is, and I will show you the percentages after we look at each state. So, looking at Pennsylvania, we had 90% silver at $17.40 per dollar for dimes and quarters. However, they separate the half dollars. In other words, they charge a little bit more for the half dollars at $18.10 per dollar. Now that came out to $24.36 per ounce, or $25.34 per ounce for the half dollars. Our next state is Michigan. Michigan has their silver at 19, well, at least the one shop that I called. There's a lot of shops in every one of these states. This is just one shop, one example, so don't judge all states based on just one shop. That being said, Michigan had silver 90% at $19 per dollar, which came out to $26.60 per ounce for their 90%. Florida, same thing, comes out at $19 per dollar, or $26.60 per ounce for their 90% silver in the state of Florida. Now, moving on to the fourth state that we called is Illinois. They had their 90% silver at $18.75 per dollar for dimes and quarters, which comes out to $26.25 per ounce, but they charged a very high number for their halves, $21 per dollar for half dollars, which comes out to $29.40 per ounce. That is a pretty significant difference, I should say, between dimes and quarters and halves at the shop that I called in Illinois. Our next state is the state of Montana. In Montana, we had $20.10 per dollar. And keep in mind, some of these shops were like, you know, they may have said 2011 or 2009. They may have just taken spot and then added their premium, then multiplied it by 0.715. And I'm going to talk to you about that math here in a second. So stick with me if you want to know, if you don't know what that is. I just rounded it to the closest, like 5 or 0. Anyway, Montana, $20.10 per dollar, which came out to $28.14 per ounce. If you take 20.1 and multiply it by 1.4. Our next state, we had the state of California, 90% silver. They had dimes and quarters and half separated as well. Their dimes and quarters for this one shop, a lot of shops in California. This one shop, $18 per dollar for dimes and quarters, $20 per dollar for half dollars. That's $25.20 per ounce for dimes and quarters, or $28 per ounce for half dollars. And the last state that I called was Washington. Now, Washington is usually one of the best states I call as far as lower premiums. Unfortunately, they did not win this time. Washington, we have 90% silver at $18.50 per dollar, which is $25.90 per ounce. So I do know it's possible that some of you don't actually know how the math on 90% silver works. So I'm going to show you that really quick before we look at the chart and then we look at the online retailers. But let's take a look at the hard numbers. So 90% coinage, if you don't know the math, if it's fresh off the line, in other words, it was just minted back in 1964, if you were to take every 4 quarters or 10 dimes or 2 halves or 1 half and 4 quarters, you get however you get to $1 face value. If you were to melt that down and refine it and remove the silver, you would have 0.7234 ounces of pure silver. However, in general, shops use 0.715 ounces per dollar, and that accounts for a little bit of wear on the coins because all of these coins have at least a little bit of circulation on them. Now, it takes $1.40 face value to equal around 1 ounce of silver. So in other words, grab a calculator and you'll see what I mean. If you take 0.715 and multiply that by 1.4, you get 1 ounce of silver. So in other words, if you have $1.40 face and you melt it down and refine it, you will have 1 ounce of pure silver remaining. Now, as I said already, 90% silver is generally bought and sold by the face value. So in other words, if you go into a shop, they'll quote you per dollar. So they might say $20 per dollar, which means you'll pay 10 for a half, or 5 for a quarter, or 2 for a dime. However, there are exceptions made, at least with some shops, where they will sell the very heavily worn circulated stuff at just weight. In other words, they'll put it on a scale, they'll multiply that number by 0.9 because it's 90% silver, and then they'll just sell it to you based on the melt weight. All right, so let's take a look at the chart here of our local coin shops. Now that we have that out of the way, if we look at shop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you see we have the per dollar amount, we have the per ounce amount, we have the hard premium amount, and we have the percentage of premium amount. Now, if we take all 7 of these shops and we average them together, we get an average of $19.03 per dollar face value. In other words, if you walked into a shop and said, hey, can I get some 90% silver? They'd say, sure, it's $19.03 per dollar on average, of course, which comes out to an average of $26.84 per ounce, which is $4.89 an ounce over spot, which is a premium of 22.5%. And then I colorized the shops based on how they compared to the average. So taking a look at shops 1 and 7, those are in green because they're well below the average. At $19.03 per dollar is the average. At $18.50 and definitely at $17.75, that is actually quite a bit below the average. Where shops 2, 3, and 6, you can see are white because they're really close to that average. And then shops 4 and 5 are above average. Meaning that if you were to call and shop around, you would definitely want to find places like shop 1 or shop 7 and avoid places like shop 4 and shop 5. Now, looking at the online retailers, we went ahead and put these numbers together. Now, keep in mind, normally I put up the screenshots from each of the online retailers, but unfortunately, I called the coin shops yesterday. However, the numbers for the online retailers I got today. So I actually had to do math and get the percentage that they were selling for over spot to figure out what it would have been yesterday. So in other words, if the shop was selling for a certain amount, I figured out what percentage that was, then use that percentage on $21.75, which was yesterday's spot price, to see what it would have been then, assuming that they hadn't increased their premium. So, or lowered their premiums, by the way. But if you take a look at this chart, you can see that most of the shops here are actually lower than the coin shop average, except for shop number 3. In fact, they're all lower. And in fact, we would probably highlight shops 1, 2, 6, and 4 in green based on how they compare to that average that we got from the coin shops. However, if we look at the online retailer average and then compare these shops, you can see only shop 4 and 6 are green, whereas shops 1, 2, and 5 are white, and shop 3 is red. And the average for the online retailers yesterday would have been $18.71 per dollar, which comes out to $26.19 an ounce, or $4.44 over spot, which is a 24.4% premium. Of course, you could definitely go and with these lower retailers and get it cheaper than the 20.43%, as you can see. So who is the real winner here? Is it local shops? Is it online? The truth is, the real winner is going to be whichever one of you sees how important it is to call around, to look around, and get your best price, to take the time for that price discovery, especially if you're spending quite a bit of money. Now, if you're only going to spend $40, you know, the difference between $18.50 per dollar and $19 per dollar doesn't matter that much. But if you're going to go out and spend $1,000, it does actually add up, and it does make a difference, and you will end up with more silver. So the winner is you, assuming that you use this as an opportunity to see how important it is to call and shop around, like I said. So guys, if you enjoyed this video today and you want to see more videos like this, do me a favor, don't forget to like so that YouTube recommends this video to others, and don't forget to subscribe to help us continue to grow the channel. Now, if you want to see more content, I'm going to put a video up here. It's a great one, so make sure you go watch that next. And otherwise, have a fantastic rest of your day. We'll see you next time.